At the wedding, my boyfriend's little admirer showed up with a slightly bulging belly. She said that she was pregnant and demanded that my boyfriend Titus give her an explanation. Otherwise, she would take the child and die together. After 10 years of chasing him, she finally succeeded. Titus ran out after her. In a 5-star hotel filled with guests, the master of ceremonies held the microphone and asked loudly, "Titus, are you willing to marry Lily as your wife? Whether in wealth or poverty, in health or sickness, will you stay by her side and never leave until forever when she needs you most?" Today, Titus in his formal attire looked especially elegant and gentle. His eyes fell on me, filled with 1,000 tender feelings. I met his gaze. He took my hand and whispered in my ear, "Hold your hand and grow old together with you." Then he took the microphone and said loudly to everyone under the stage, "I will." Suddenly, he choked on the word, "will." I saw his Adam's apple bob up close, his complexion looked really bad. I followed his gaze and sure enough, it was that woman again, Rose. I felt as if my heart had been tightly grasped by someone and it hurt terribly. This woman was like a thorn stuck in my heart, pervasive and inescapable at all times. My boyfriend Titus and I were childhood sweethearts, the kind that had no secrets between us. When we were kids, our parents joked about arranging a betrothal for us. At the high school graduation ceremony, under the school's rose bushes, he confessed his love to me. Amid the teasing of many classmates, with the shyness of a young girl, I took his hand. Our classmates and friends kept clapping and shouting loudly, "Get together, get together." I was young back then and very shy, just standing there blushing, even a bit at a loss, but at that moment, a girl in our class suddenly ran over. Right in front of me, she shyly handed him a love letter. For an instant, the air seemed to stand still. She said, "Titus, I love you." As she spoke, she rushed forward to hug Titus and kissed him on the cheek in front of me. Titus, taken aback, hurriedly pushed her away. Then he tore the love letter to shreds, threw it under the sun, and it fell to the ground along with the swirling rose petals. "Rose, what are you making a fuss about?" Titus had a ferocious expression and an extremely impatient tone. Rose had tears in her eyes. After a while, she trembled her lips and said, "Titus, you said that after graduating from high school, we would be together." In full view of everyone, Titus gritted his teeth and said, "Since sophomore year of high school, you've been constantly harassing me. I told you to study hard and not think about these pointless things. When did I ever say that I would be with you?" As he spoke, he took my hand from the side and loudly announced to his good friends and classmates, "I, Titus, will only love Lily in my whole life." He said this firmly, like taking an oath. I thought that after being rejected by Titus, Rose would naturally give up. When Titus took my hand and left that day, I turned to look at her and found that her gaze was sinister. Even under the sun, it gave off a gloomy chill. When I went to college in Jinling, Titus went to study in the capital. I didn't know what Rose was thinking. She actually gave up the school she had originally applied for and followed Titus to the capital. It was only after graduating from college that I heard from Titus that Rose had gone to the capital and used many connections to get into a junior college that wasn't very famous. The early bird catches the worm. Like this, she began to show her attentiveness in front of Titus. Titus' friends told me that she cooked and washed clothes for him and blatantly wormed her way into his life. At first, Titus was very disgusted, lost his temper, and even cursed. But he couldn't stop Rose's obsession. Titus threatened that if she came to find him again, he would call the police. He was tough, but Rose was even tougher. She said, in this life, Titus was everything to her. Without him, she would rather die. She had tried cutting her wrists, jumping off buildings, and taking sleeping pills. When Titus came back to date me, she would follow him like a shadow. During the summer vacation of our junior year, when Titus and I were on a date in a high-end club, she showed up again. She sat at the next table, didn't order food, didn't eat, just silently watched. I really couldn't bear it. Our nice two-person world was interrupted by such a person in between Titus and me. I told Titus to have a good talk with her and tell her clearly not to follow him like this. Titus walked over, tried to persuade her with reason and emotion, told her that the person he liked was me, not her, and hoped that she would stop pestering him. However, Rose said, "Titus, who you like is your business, but I like you." I couldn't help but say at that time, "Rose, what you're doing is destroying other people's relationship. You're a mistress. How shameless are you?" I could tell that Titus really didn't like her and was honest and upright with me. But we just couldn't stop this woman's pervasive pestering. After I said that, Rose pitifully raised her head, looked at Titus, and asked him, "Do you also think I'm shameless?" "Yes," Titus said harshly. That night, Titus received a call from the police saying that Rose had climbed onto the rooftop and was going to jump off, which alarmed many people. The police patiently persuaded her. She said that without love, what was the point of her living, and that she might as well die. Based on the principle of saving lives, the police found Titus. Reluctantly, Titus said something against his will and persuaded her to come down. Rose was criticized and educated by the police because of this incident. But using love as a pretext, the police didn't investigate further, and she became even crazier and often threatened Titus and me with death. Titus repeatedly told me that the person he loved was me and asked me to rest assured. I also firmly believed that he really had no feelings for Rose. However, we couldn't stop Rose's pestering. I had privately arranged to meet Rose once. I thought that I needed to talk to her and hoped that she would stop pestering Titus like this. At first, she just looked at me without saying a word. Later, she went crazy and shouted at me. She said that her parents favored boys over girls. Since she was a child, she had been just a foil in the family and no one liked her. While I came from a wealthy family, was doted on by my parents, and had Titus. I had everything. Why couldn't I give Titus to her? I still remember her absurd and ridiculous words to this day. Why did God create a woman like you to make things difficult for me? Without you, Titus would surely love me, definitely. It was a hysterical madness. That day, we met in a coffee shop. She smashed the cups in the coffee shop and stared at me viciously. Her gaze was just like that of a wolf in the midnight. At that time, the waiters in the coffee shop were all frightened. From beginning to end, she didn't show the slightest bit of guilt for being a mistress. She thought that I had destroyed the relationship between her and Titus. Every time she looked at me, her eyes were filled with hatred. When Titus' family formally came to my family to propose marriage, I asked Titus what should we do about her. Based on my understanding of her, she wouldn't give up so easily. Titus said that he would find a way to solve it. Titus went to meet Rose alone. I didn't know what they talked about or how they talked. But that night, Titus didn't come back. In the next 3 months or so, we were preparing for the wedding and everything was going on as planned. That woman seemed to have disappeared suddenly. Titus said that he had made it clear to her that we were getting married and asked her not to make trouble anymore. I had some doubts in my heart. If it could be made clear so easily, could Rose have pestered us for so long? That woman had a madman living in her heart. I even suspected that there was something wrong with her mental state. Sure enough, this woman was as crazy as ever. She didn't stop making trouble. She just wanted to make a scene at our wedding and make it known to everyone. She deliberately brought a microphone and her voice steadily reached every corner of the banquet hall. Titus, you're getting married? What about me? What about our child? Her words caused a huge stir. All the guests hissed and started asking questions one after another. I looked at Rose's slightly bulging belly and my heart started pounding wildly. It seemed that I understood what had happened between Titus and her that night. However, Titus' behavior was very strange. He angrily reprimanded her. What nonsense are you talking about? When did I have a child with you? Rose walked towards the front stage covered with a red carpet. Then she bowed to me and said that she shouldn't disrupt my wedding, but she loved Titus too much. He was all the hope in her life and without him, she couldn't live. My best friend rushed up and loudly cursed her, shameless. She seemed not to have heard it at all. Her face was gloomy and terrifying like a devil from hell. Rose, what on earth do you want to do? There was extreme anger in my tone. Over the years, I was really fed up with this crazy woman. I had prepared for the wedding for a long time, but now she had made a complete mess of it. Titus directly called the security guards and was ready to drive Rose away. I can leave. Rose's tone was extremely calm. Titus, if you get married today, I'll take the child and die together. I want you to remember me forever. As she spoke, her cold gaze fell on me. Without using the microphone, she just came close to me and asked me if it was okay to use the blood of her and Titus' child as my wedding gift. I shuddered. If she really died, then Titus and I would live in her shadow for the rest of our lives. How cruel and crazy she was. My best friend cursed her. If you want to die, it has nothing to do with others. Don't use morality to blackmail anyone. Yes, I also agreed with my best friend's words. It's one thing that you like Titus, but Titus doesn't like you at all. Don't use love as an excuse and then use morality to blackmail me. My best friend cursed her. If you want to die, it has nothing to do with others. Don't use morality to blackmail anyone. Yes, I also agreed with my best friend's words. Watching her leave, Titus seemed a bit flustered and his complexion was extremely bad. After a while, he said to me, Lily, I'll go and see. She might really commit suicide. I couldn't help but take a step back. Sorry, Titus said and didn't stop for a moment. He quickly chased after her outside. He left me alone at the wedding venue. I took the microphone and said to all the guests, the wedding is cancelled. Before I finished speaking, tears streamed down my face. In this absurd game of love, I admitted defeat. Marriage and love are two different things. I wanted to see if a forced relationship would be sweet. I wondered if Rose would regret it after becoming Mrs. Titus. My mother and my relatives all comforted me. How did Titus turn out like this? Although my mother was comforting me, she was also extremely angry. I shook my head. Titus hadn't changed. He was just kind-hearted. Just now, when Rose showed up with her protruding belly, Titus' reaction was very strange. At first, I also thought that he had betrayed me in our relationship. After all, he couldn't resist Rose's persistent pestering. But now that I think about it, something seems wrong. Of course, I don't want to talk about this topic either. I asked my mother to get ready to return the betrothal gifts from the Titus family. I also sorted out the valuable gifts that Titus had given me over the years and prepared to return them to the Titus family. In the evening, Titus' mother came to our door in person to apologize to me and my family. She looked ashamed and just said that it was an unfortunate thing for their family to have such a person like Rose around and that the Titus family owed me an apology. From her words, it was obvious that she had a deep sense of disgust, dislike, and contempt for Rose. When I said that I wanted to return the betrothal gifts, she refused and said that it was compensation for me. What happened next was told to me by my best friend, Lana, who is also Titus' cousin. After Titus left with Rose, Rose didn't forgive him just like that. She staged a drama of threatening to jump off a building to force Titus to marry her. Titus also got angry and shouted at her, "Go ahead and jump. I'd rather not get married for the rest of my life." I know that Titus has always believed that human life is of utmost importance, so he respects life and respects her. But it seems that Rose has never respected his feelings. Since someone was threatening to jump off a building, kind-hearted people called the police again. Theoretically speaking, for someone like Rose, she could be sued and accused of disturbing social order. However, the police were also kind-hearted people and they all thought that Rose and Titus just had some emotional conflicts and it wasn't necessary to leave a stain on the girl's life record. So, they not only tried to persuade Rose gently but also persuaded Titus. Since they already had a child, they should quickly get married and live a good life. They even said that having a girl who was deeply in love with him was his good fortune. Titus then started to discuss the wedding with Rose. There was no 5 pieces of gold jewelry and a diamond ring or a formal wedding. Rose proposed that they go on a trip and get married. Titus retorted, "Should I just ignore the family business? Do you think everyone is like you? Are you out of your mind? You keep saying that you love me. Can't you think about me for a change? The baby will be born soon. Don't you think formula milk and diapers cost money? Are you going to support the family? You're so stupid." The Titus family had a premarital property notarization and also wrote a premarital property agreement with very harsh conditions. Rose's parents didn't agree and went to make a scene at the Titus family. Titus just said, "If you don't agree, take your daughter and get out. Don't ever show up in front of me again." For Rose's family, it was already an extremely embarrassing thing that their daughter got pregnant before marriage, made her belly big, and also disrupted the wedding between Titus and me. However, Rose's mother loved her daughter so much that she still wanted to fight for it. After all, according to the current premarital agreement, no matter how long it took, Rose would end up with nothing. Rose's mother said that since Rose already had a child, Titus shouldn't be so heartless. Titus sneered and retorted, "Do you know what your daughter has done? The child? Was it something obtained by drugging my tea?" Only then did Rose's mother know that Rose had somehow managed to get some drugs and tricked Titus into drinking the tea that she had drugged. In a fit of anger, Rose's mother slapped her daughter. The day before getting married to Rose, Titus asked me out. We met at a coffee shop. He said that he wanted to have a chat with me. I agreed. After all, we had grown up together since childhood. Even if we couldn't be together, there was no need for us to never see each other again. He told me a lot of things about Rose. In the second year of high school, when several hooligans bullied Rose, he stepped in to help her out of a sense of justice. He said that any man with a bit of courage would have helped when seeing something like that. After that, Rose wrote him love letters to express her affection. At that time, Titus and I were encouraging each other with the goal of getting into a top 985 university. How could he have time to deal with these things? So, he kindly advised Rose that in high school, studying should be the priority and she shouldn't think about these things. When the college entrance examination scores came out and it was time to fill in the university application forms, Rose asked her classmates and found out that I was staying in the city. She thought that Titus was also staying in the city, so she applied to a university in this city. However, Titus went to the capital city. Titus also told me that he thought that once she went to university and broadened her horizons, she wouldn't pester him anymore. But nobody expected that Rose would follow Titus to the capital city. Her parents had tried to persuade her, but they couldn't stop her from threatening to kill herself. Finally, her family spent money and asked for help and finally managed to get her into a not-so-good junior college. Her parents should have treated her very well. It wasn't like what she said that her family favored her younger brother because of the preference for sons over daughters and didn't care about her at all. Titus apologized to me, saying that he really hadn't expected to get into such trouble. It was his fault for failing our childhood sweetheart relationship. When I looked up at him, Titus' eyes were bloodshot and he looked haggard. As for me, my heart had always been on Titus. Now that we were separating like this, it would be a lie to say that I wasn't sad. I don't know why, but my heart ached from time to time. But I still managed to force a smile and wished him well. Titus, there you are. Just at that moment, I heard a loud shout. Looking up, I saw Rose. I was about to explain to Rose that our family and the Titus family had always had business dealings and that the elders of both families were friends and that it was impossible for us not to have any contact in the future. Since she was going to marry Titus, she should also put away this inexplicable jealous attitude and live a good life. Before I could say anything, Rose picked up the coffee cup. What are you doing? Titus was afraid that she would hurt me and quickly blocked her, saying, You've already ruined our wedding. I'm just here to apologize to Lily. Apologize for what? Rose's voice was extremely shrill. Lily, I already have a child with Titus. Why are you still pestering him? You're shameless. From the beginning to the end, you've always been in the way between me and Titus. Do you have to force me to death to be satisfied? She roared at me hysterically. Everyone in the coffee shop turned to look at us. She then smashed the coffee cup on her own head. Blood mixed with coffee covered her head and face. She stared at me with a ferocious look and asked me, Lily, are you satisfied now? Suddenly, I felt really sorry for Titus. Having to spend a lifetime with such a crazy woman would be really difficult. After I went back, I discussed it with my mother and decided to go abroad to study. Firstly, since Titus and Rose were getting married after all, it would be inevitable to feel awkward when we met. Secondly, I also wanted to go out and relax. After I left, without me as the imaginary rival, Rose's attention shifted to Titus. She still didn't relax her vigilance at all. She often followed and stalked him. Whenever Titus came home a few minutes late, she would pester him with endless questions. Titus had never been nice to her. I heard from Lana that after marriage, Rose lived in a separate room. The reason given by the Titus family was that she was pregnant and needed to take good care of herself. Whenever Rose made a fuss, Titus' mother would ask her, Don't you love Titus? Can't you bear such a little bit of hardship? She had made scenes before, but not everyone would fall for her tricks. The normal situation in the Titus family was that Rose quarreled with Titus' mother. Rose quarreled with Lana. Rose quarreled with both Titus' mother and Lana. Rose threatened to kill herself to force Titus. But anyway, after all the bumps and tumbles, Rose finally gave birth to the child. With the birth of a baby girl, the originally tense relationship finally eased a little. Both Titus' mother and Lana liked this newly born baby very much. Since I wasn't around, Rose quickly found another imaginary rival. It was one of Titus' assistants. The mother of this little assistant was sick. Treating the illness and buying medicine cost a lot of money like water flowing away. In order to treat her mother's illness, the little assistant worked extremely hard. Once, when they couldn't get an order, she volunteered to negotiate. After grinding for more than a week, she finally managed to win the order. Titus was very happy and praised her in public. Considering her family situation, Titus specially asked Lana to give her an extra bonus of 20,000 yuan. I don't know how Rose found out about it. Anyway, after she learned about the existence of this little assistant, she became extremely vigilant as if facing a formidable enemy. While Titus was on a business trip, she went to the Titus family's company and made a big scene. She beat the little assistant and scratched her face and neck. The mother of the little assistant had that kind of illness that cost a lot of money. The little assistant was so focused on her work. Knowing that Rose was the wife of the president, she didn't dare to offend her at all and just let her beat her without daring to fight back. Fortunately, some senior employees in the company knew about her and Titus' situation and Lana arrived in time to stop her. Lana couldn't bear it anymore and called the police. At first, the police thought it was a family conflict and planned to talk to both sides and just let it go. However, Lana wouldn't let it go. So, because of maliciously assaulting others, Rose was sentenced to compensate for the medical expenses and was detained for 15 days. At the end of the year, I returned to China. Lana came to pick me up right after I got off the plane. Looking at her expression, I knew something was going on. And as expected, it was Rose causing trouble again. Sure enough, as soon as I got into her car, she started swearing while starting the engine. After getting out of the detention center, Rose became even more hostile towards Lana and picked fights several times, trying to make Lana move out of the Titus family. The reason was quite simple. Since Lana wasn't Titus's biological sister, why should she stay in the Titus family? She didn't lack her own house either. Titus's mother said with a cold face that Lana was her own niece and she had raised her since she was a child. She was no different from her own daughter. If they wanted to drive Lana away, they might as well drive her away first. In almost a year's time, Titus's mother had figured out her tricks. So, before she could make things difficult, Titus's mother took the initiative to challenge her. Who couldn't make a fuss by threatening to take their own life? Titus's mother also asked people to spread the news in the community. First, she said that Rose didn't respect or show filial piety to her in-laws. Now, she even wanted to force her niece, whom she had raised since childhood, to leave. Titus's mother said that this was like taking her life. My family and the Titus family lived in the same community, and there were many acquaintances. Everyone also knew about me and Titus. Everyone saw what Rose did and despised her in their hearts. Rose was isolated in the Titus family and basically isolated in the whole community as well. I sighed softly. Aunt Lou in my mind had always been noble, elegant, and dignified. Now, she was actually forced into a desperate situation by Rose and had to act like a shrew and threaten to take her own life? Rose was really shameless. Lana slowed down the car and even slowly pulled over. Lily, you know what? I'm going to tell you a shocking piece of news. You'd better sit tight, Lana said with a solemn look. I asked in confusion, go ahead. She's been making trouble for so many years. Besides committing suicide, what other shocking news could she make? She's just pretending to commit suicide. When she wants to jump off a building, she deliberately chooses a crowded place. When she wants to cut her wrists, she insists on doing it in front of my brother. When she wants to hang herself, she goes to a busy street corner. If she really wanted to die, how could she still be alive after all these years? Lana sneered. She's just taking advantage of my brother and your kindness and soft-heartedness. If my brother hadn't been such a kind person and hadn't helped her when she was in trouble back then, how could he have gotten into this mess? I just remained silent about this question. Because of Rose, I had also quarreled with Titus and complained about him. Why did he have to meddle in other people's business back then? Why did he save such a troublemaker? But when I thought about it later, if everyone turned a blind eye and did nothing when a weak woman was being bullied for fear of getting into trouble, what would this world be like? Wouldn't people stop being human? People can become the most intelligent beings among all things because we have emotions, compassion, and mercy, I murmured. Lana smiled and shook her head, saying, Lily, she's ruined the happiness of my brother and you. How can you still have compassion for her? My happiness isn't something she can destroy, I said. Don't keep me in suspense. What shocking news did she make? She cheated on my brother. The child isn't his. Lana slapped the steering wheel and laughed until tears came out. I stared at Lana blankly, as if listening to a fairy tale. I would believe that anyone in the world cheated, but Rose? She had been pestering Titus, even willing to die for him for so many years. She gave up her original undergraduate university and went to the capital city. She didn't even care about being suspected of being a mistress and made a big fuss in front of me. Finally, she managed to break me and Titus up. And now she cheated? From the very beginning, the child wasn't my brother's, Lana said. From Lana's account, I learned that, at the end of the year, Titus was busy with a lot of things in his company. That day, he was supposed to have a business dinner in the evening, but he happened to feel unwell. So, he asked the vice president of the company to take his place and went home early. As soon as he got home, he heard a man's voice coming from Rose's room. At first, he thought it was the TV. But when he pushed the door open, he saw a man making advances to Rose. Seeing Titus come back, both of them in the room were shocked. After a moment of stunned silence, Rose came to her senses and then started acting, saying that the man was some relative of hers and had come to see her for something. Of course, Titus didn't believe her and slammed the door and left. Lana asked me, Lily, do you know who that man was? I shook my head. I had been abroad for a year. Although I hadn't deliberately blocked out everything about Titus, I hadn't paid too much attention either. Firstly, I was afraid of being reminded of him when I saw things related to him. Secondly, I was also afraid of doing something inappropriate that would go against my moral conscience. He was one of the hooligans who bullied her back then, Lana said with extreme disdain and contempt in her tone. The child is also his. What do you think my brother has been through? I couldn't hide my shock and didn't come to my senses for a long time. Lana started the car and drove slowly, telling me the story while driving. After the child was born, Titus actually had a paternity test done. Although he hadn't experienced romantic relationships before, these days, even if you haven't eaten pork, you've seen pigs running around. He just didn't believe that after he was drugged and passed out unconscious, what could Rose do with him? Also, Rose had some problems with a cold womb during her prenatal checkups. This minor problem of a cold womb, if it were in ancient times, there would be a certain probability of not being able to conceive a child. Now, of course, it's not a big deal. A woman with a cold womb drugged a man, and just once, she got pregnant? Titus was suspicious, and there was no suspense about the result of the paternity test. He wasn't the biological father of the child. He planned to find out who Rose's man was. Why were you still pestering him when you were with someone else? He didn't understand it. He just saved her out of a moment of kindness. How did it seem like he owed her a debt? That hooligan was named Grayson. He was usually idle, drinking, gambling, and owed a lot of debts outside. When the loan sharks came to his door and beat him up twice, he got some evil ideas. Rose asked him to father a child for her and then married into a wealthy family. So, he went to threaten Rose for money. The first time, Rose gave him 50,000 yuan. The second time, she gave him 80,000 yuan. Having tasted the sweetness, Grayson went to pester her again and asked for 2 million yuan, saying that it would be a one-time settlement. As long as Rose gave him the money, he would leave the city immediately with the money and never come back. He even said that it was good for his daughter to stay in the Titus family, to be a little princess and live a comfortable life. Where could Rose get so much money? The original money was obtained by secretly pawning Titus's mother's valuable jewelry. The two had an argument in the room, which was witnessed by Titus. After this happened, not to mention that Titus had no feelings for her in the first place, even normal couples with feelings would have to get divorced. Therefore, Titus filed for divorce. The Titus family was in chaos. Titus's mother said that she wanted to go abroad for a trip to relax and handed over the company's affairs to Lana to take care of. Titus couldn't stand Rose. On the night I returned to China, she moved in to live with me. Her move made Rose feel extremely threatened again, and she even came to my house to make a scene, asking me if I wouldn't be satisfied until she was dead. I was really angry and amused at the same time. I hadn't seen Titus since I returned from abroad. Even if she was jealous, she shouldn't be jealous of me, right? Besides, who wanted to kill whom? If it weren't for her, Titus and I would have lived a very happy life. My mother lost her temper and slapped her, telling her to go die far away and not at my doorstep. She made a scene at my doorstep, saying that I was a mistress and had interfered in the relationship between her and Titus. The old lady next door came back from a walk with her little grandson. When she saw her, she sneered, "Girl from Rose's family have some conscience." The girl from Lily's family and the boy from the Titus family grew up together. If it weren't for you making trouble, they would have gotten married long ago. Poor old me. I didn't even get to drink their wedding wine. But you, shameless thing, got pregnant by a hooligan and still cling to the Titus family, just taking advantage of the honesty of the boy from the Titus family. If you met a rascal, he would beat you up twice every 3 days. You little bitch wouldn't survive. With that, the old lady next door spat and pulled her grandson away. In the end, she didn't forget to tell her little grandson, "Cherish your life and stay away from bitches." Rose couldn't make a big fuss at my house. My mother was determined not to let her in and told her that if she dared to come in, she would sue her for trespassing. Perhaps because she had been detained once, Rose wasn't as bold as before and finally gave up. Titus filed for divorce. He hired a lawyer and collected evidence. Even in almost a year's time, he also verified the matter of Rose drugging him back then and presented all of it in court. Rose had tried to commit suicide several times and had even been to the police station, with the police dispatch records as evidence. She stole Titus's mother's high-end jewelry and sold it, with video evidence and receipts from 2 pawnshops as proof. In view of all the above, the court granted the divorce. The lawyer told Titus that Rose drugging him and knocking him unconscious actually constituted the crime of indecent assault. However, China's laws in this regard were not yet perfect, but Rose stealing Titus's mother's jewelry could be sued. Although the sentence wouldn't be long, 1 or 2 years would be possible. Titus and the lawyer were discussing and preparing to sue. After all, as long as Rose was out there, she would still make trouble. Although they got divorced, Rose was still staying in the Titus family with the child. At the entrance of the court, she held the child in her arms, knelt on the ground, and begged Titus to let the mother and daughter stay for 3 days. She said that in 3 days, she would surely disappear from Titus's sight with the child. She was wrong and would never dare to disturb Titus and me again. I really wanted to say that what did this have to do with me? On the internet, there were still some people who didn't know the truth and were clamoring to support her, saying, "It's a great thing to correct your mistakes when you know them." 3 days wasn't a big deal, and Titus didn't express his opinion. However, what we never dreamed of was that Rose was still Rose, and she had an unimaginable ability to cause trouble. She started a live stream, committing suicide. She said that this time, she wanted to die in a spectacular way. And it was indeed spectacular. She turned on the gas stove and then set fire to it. Of course, nowadays the speed of internet dissemination is very fast, and the firefighting facilities in various cities are also quite good. When it comes to committing suicide on a live stream, it's not that easy to die. Although I'm not her, after all these years of being pestered by her, I can somewhat understand her state of mind. The child wasn't Titus's. Whether it was within marriage or outside of it, she drugged Titus but couldn't manage to have a child with him, so she had a baby with someone else. If Titus wanted a divorce, she wouldn't be able to justify herself in any way. However, she just couldn't resign herself to it. She planned to make a scene again using her usual tricks and mobilize the power of online public opinion to force Titus to give in. In front of the camera, she wept pitifully, narrating her love for Titus. As for why she had an affair, she just wanted to bind him with a child. Everything she did was supposedly out of love for him. She talked so beautifully. She used a candle to set fire to combustibles like curtains, and then, in the midst of the spreading flames, she danced, with an elegant posture and graceful bearing. Just as she expected, she didn't die. Her live stream video went viral. The police and firefighters broke down the door and rescued her. However, fire and water are merciless. That poor child didn't survive. According to the doctor, due to excessive inhalation of carbon monoxide and burns, it was just a little too late when the child was sent to the hospital. Titus sued her for intentional murder that led to the death of his child. Yes, even if they were getting divorced, he was still the nominal father of that child. The evidence was conclusive, and Rose couldn't deny it at all. However, the police suspected that Rose suffered from a mental illness and gave her a test. In the end, she had to be confined in a mental hospital for the rest of her life. On the day when the child's ashes were buried, I went there. Titus named her Aliyah. When I returned from abroad and knew that his child had been born, I deliberately brought a Barbie doll. Due to various reasons, I never had the chance to give this gift. Now, I placed it in front of the tombstone. May you be reincarnated into a good family in your next life. I whispered in front of the tombstone. Titus took my hand but I shook it off. He said, Lily, the obstacle between us has been removed. I'll marry you. Yes, the obstacle between us had been removed but I didn't want to and couldn't marry him anymore. I shook my head and refused, saying that I didn't love him anymore. He asked me why. Why? I walked past Aliyah's tombstone and headed towards another tombstone where Knox Titus's father, who was Aliyah's nominal grandfather, was buried. That day, at the wedding, you said sorry to me, and I saw the murderous look in your eyes. I said in a low voice to the tombstone, Titus, when a person stares into the abyss for too long, he will eventually be swallowed up by it. Besides, you've always been in the abyss. No matter what kindness you use to save your depraved heart, it's useless. Titus staggered back. You and I were never meant to be together. Just like Uncle Lou and my auntie years ago. Once you miss it, it's a lifetime. There's no turning back. I ignored Titus and walked towards the other side of the cemetery with a bouquet of roses wrapped in thorns. Epilogue. In the spring of the following year, I took a bouquet of wild roses and went to the mental hospital to visit Rose. Her face was completely disfigured and under the effect of sedatives, her reactions were very slow. I placed the wild roses in front of her. She smiled at me and asked me if I would marry Titus. I shook my head and told her that Titus's father and my auntie died in a fire. My auntie danced in the flames, looking extremely beautiful. Knox painted a picture of her. Now, that picture that wasn't burned down is still kept in Titus's study. At first, the police thought it was a family conflict and planned to talk to both sides and just let it go. However, Lana wouldn't let it go. So, because of maliciously assaulting us, it said that wild roses and thorns belonged to the same family. I said in a low voice. I saw a glimmer of light in her eyes that had been as lifeless as ashes. When I walked out of the mental hospital, the sun was setting in the west and dusk was approaching. I knew that at my wedding banquet, Titus's sorry wasn't meant for me, but for himself. From the very beginning, he knew that the child wasn't his. It was also from that time that the evil thoughts in his heart could no longer be suppressed. Since Lana moved into my house when I returned from abroad and Titus's mother went abroad for a trip, I knew that his plan had started. Just like what he did many years ago, it was clean, neat, and spectacular. Many people have forgotten that the day when Rose set fire to commit suicide happened to be the anniversary of the death of Knox and my auntie. Through thorns and difficulties, he was burdened with the debt of evil in his heart. The end.